In this video, we're going to examine not only the situation in Ukraine, but across the broader global impact of this conflict, including potential threats to our food supply and economy. We're also going to discuss a farm crisis that's been smoldering for decades, which isn't in your news cycle right now, and why fewer American farmers, reduced harvest, and declining farm income are warning signs for our food security. I'm also going to dive into the effects of rising heat on agriculture and infrastructure. Also, a story just broke out last night and this morning, and even right before I recorded this, regarding a number of social media influencers here in the United States, some of which you may actually be following. It turns out Russia has been paying them in excess of $400,000 per month per influencer to promote certain talking points. It's an interesting story, and I'm going to give my take as someone with a platform here on YouTube. We're also going to have another great giveaway, so you're going to want to watch until the end to find out how you can enter to be part of that. So let's go ahead and jump in. If you're new to this channel, my name is Chris, and on this channel we discuss emergency preparedness, aka prepping. Every other week or every week we try to break down the larger threats that we see in the headlines and their potential impact, even if you're far away from the conflict zone, to really help you make informed decisions about how you're going to prepare wherever you are. Now, before jumping in, I do want to let you know that the City Prepping community opened this past Monday, but we're going to be closing it down on Sunday night. So we're coming up on our last opportunity to join the community for the next several months. I'll post a link in the description and comment section below if you want to be part of that. We're going to be doing a new course called our 3 weeks to 3 weeks preparedness course to help you get started on your preparedness journey. And we'll be launching that with the community next week as part of giveaways and a lot of other things. Hope to see you there. So let's go ahead and get into the news. Farm crisis. Not all important stories make the headlines, so I occasionally like to cover ones that might not be getting a lot of attention but will affect your future. United States agriculture is one of those slow-burning issues that has big consequences. Now, we've discussed some of the problems here before on the channel, and they're going to go beyond just the heat waves and droughts. For example, foreign countries are buying up American farmland. They're sending their harvest back home, bypassing the U.S. food system, which is a topic that we'll dive into in a future video. There's also the issue of reduced harvest from extreme weather and the risk of monocultural farming, where growing only one crop type can lead to massive failures if conditions are not right. And all of this, it can seem abstract, but a clear picture of trouble really begins to emerge when we look at the data. Let's focus on 3 indicators that show a looming problem for American farmers and by extension for our food supply. First, the number of farms in the United States has been declining for decades. In 1935, there were 6.8 million farms. By 2023, that number had dropped to 1.89 million. Now, rising production costs, an aging workforce, and market volatility have all made it harder for smaller farmers to survive, leading to fewer but larger farming operations. Now, these larger farms often prioritize efficiency and export their goods to countries that are willing to pay more, especially when those countries they face crop shortages. Now, the second indicator is farm income. In 2023, farm income experienced its largest projected decline in history, with net farm income expected to drop by $29.7 billion from the previous year. Now, high input costs and falling commodity prices, they're squeezing profits, especially for smaller farms. Now, the third indicator is crop and animal receipts, basically the income farmers get from selling their products. They're also declining, with total animal product receipts expected to drop by 1.9% in 2024. And this means fewer farms find it profitable to stay in business, further shrinking the agricultural sector. You felt all of these in a grocery store in the form of inflation, and what's the other one? Shrinkflation. And it costs more to produce the same amount of food, and manufacturers and food distributors, they cook that number in their products long before inventory levels drop. Even when there's a bumper crop of something one year, the rising price reflects the rising cost of years past or years projected. And we have the data on these 3 factors: farm numbers, farm income, and crop and animal receipts going back to the 1930s. So this is a long, slow trend that many don't see because it moves ever so slowly. Many are only now understanding the problem because they are realizing price spikes. Because of its slow speed, we have plugged-in solutions here or there with better agricultural practices, science applied to the genetics of seed strains, larger corporate farms, and importing food from other countries. But each of these is just a temporary patch. Each of these winds the food supply a little more tightly. And when we see a major drought or disruption to the food supply chain, it's increasingly more dramatic. But it shouldn't be a surprise because we can see the data. So what can you do? Our food supply is going to continue to be challenged in the future, not just because of weather. As I've often said on this channel, just because it is grown in America, hear me out, it does not mean it's going to feed Americans. Resources like food, they go to the highest bidder when multinational corporations are in charge. When you understand these realities and you begin to understand that the indicators are all going down, it's easy to see why prioritizing your food and skills like cooking and preserving food are so important. And while we can't control farming practices or food prices, we can prepare. I would encourage you to start by setting aside at least 3 weeks worth of food to buffer against supply chain disruptions or price spikes. Consider starting out growing a little of your own food, even if it's just in a small garden or on a windowsill, and diversify what you eat to reduce dependence on staples like corn, wheat, and rice. And lastly, try sourcing food locally to reduce reliance on fragile international supply chains. I don't want to be dramatic, but the warning signs are all there. It's just about getting ready before the problems become too big to ignore. So what do you think? Are we going to be able to pivot our agricultural industry out of this, or are we about to feel the effects of these indicators coming to a head? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Ukraine and Russia. Turning to the headlines you're more likely to see this week, the Russian war against Ukraine is on its 925th day. It's far from the static stalemate that it was seemingly locked in just 100 days ago. We've been now following this for a while because as preppers, it impacts the global supply of food and natural resources. It damages economies, and it can potentially explode beyond the confines of those two countries militarily in the form of cyber attacks, acts of sabotage and terrorism, and potentially even radioactively. Now, Putin and his leadership have continually threatened nuclear retaliation. And the last line they said was if their actual borders were breached, and we saw that with Ukraine making massive strides into the Kursk Oblast of Russia. We told you that when Ukraine controlling the Sutsu pipeline was kind of like putting an anchor down, so Russia was unlikely to repel Ukrainian forces. Now, the cross-border attack was in the hopes of drawing Russian forces away from the Donetsk region of Ukraine, but it didn't really have that effect. Ukraine has to be cautious about overextending its forces in the region. I also indicated last week that the crossing of the Russian border revealed how desperate both sides are. And while both sides are suffering casualties, Russia's meat grinder approach has been forcing Putin to visit Chechnya for fresh forces. He was also activating Lyshenko to make threats from Belarus and build up forces on his border with Ukraine. And finally, I made the prediction that having crossed the border would make it easier for Ukrainian forces to infiltrate and strike with drones deep into Russia and certainly around Moscow. Now, this week we saw that when a number of drones, over 100, struck targets in and around Moscow. The type of drone shown in this video and captured in many other similar videos is a Mugen 5 design. That's important to understand when you consider these types of drones, they don't have a range when loaded with explosives of the 570 kilometers they would need to travel if they were launched from Ukraine's border with Russia and Sumy. Now, some of the drones went even further to strike infrastructure facilities northwest of Moscow. And that can only mean that these 100 plus drones were launched against Russian targets from within Russia's borders. That's going to put Putin and Russian citizens on high alert. It's also probably the reason why Russia, again, has threatened to use nuclear weapons on the United States. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that Western support for Ukraine's military, mainly supplying long-range missiles, risk escalating the conflict into a global war. And he cautioned that allowing Ukraine to strike within Russian territory would provoke catastrophic consequences, including the possibility of World War III. And he also hinted at the possibility of revisiting Russia's nuclear doctrine in response to the growing threat of Western intervention. The United States and its allies have emphasized that their military aid is intended for defense, not for offensive attacks on Russia, but it's probably just a matter of time before we see some of these supplied weapons hitting targets in Russia. It's just inevitable. And the Russian economy is clearly having trouble funding its war machine, and that has to leave us wondering what nefarious deals are being struck between Putin and the supposedly neutral countries of India and China. Modi, the leader of India, he met with Zelensky last month. However, it's recently been revealed that India and Russia have built up secret trade channels. Russia covertly turned to India to secure critical electronic supplies, leveraging its large stockpile of Indian rupees amassed from oil sales, according to leaked documents. Now, in October 2022, Russia's trade ministry planned to spend around $1 billion worth of rupees through trade channels outside of Western scrutiny, using a shadowy trade group with ties to Russian secret services to source electronic components. And while it's unclear how much of the plan was actually implemented, trade data since mid-2022 shows a sharp increase in electronics and machinery imports from India, aligning with the operation's goals. So long as there's money to be made and resources to be gained, we can probably expect that China, India, Iran, and North Korea to continue to covertly supply Russia with the weapons and materials that it needs to continue the conflict. Now, our concern is what Putin is promising in exchange and how that might alter the geopolitics moving forward. From a preparedness standpoint, this conflict will continue to strain the global food supply, the flow of natural resources, and the economies of several nations. And these are all perfect reasons to continue preparing. Even if you aren't directly attacked, wherever you are in the world, the impact of this conflict approaching its 1,000th day will continue to creep further into the epicenter in many different ways. So what do you think? Is this war any closer to a resolution, or are we heading into yet another alarming chapter as we approach this 1,000-day mark? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Giveaway. This week's winner is going to receive a set of long-range two-way radios, and all you have to do to participate in the giveaway is just simply comment on this video, give it a thumbs up, and complete the giveaway form linked in the description section below. Now, this information is only going to be accessible to our team, and we'll use a random selection tool next week, and we'll choose a winner from the comments, and we'll reach out to you via email that you provide with the submitted form. So congrats to our last giveaway winner for the 5-in-1 water filter straw auxiliary pump and a live straw, Michael Osteen. We'll get that sent right away to you. Heat. We have yet again crossed new milestones and set new records. 68 million people are experiencing a severe drought in southern Africa, even as the Sahara Desert is getting rain. Around the world, 15 national heat records have been broken so far this year. Closer to home, we have some records that have been set as well here. Phoenix, they just topped over 100 consecutive days with temperatures above 100 degrees. The previous record was 76 days in a row set back in 1993. Now, Las Vegas has also broken its record with 86 days over 100 degrees. And while we expect both Phoenix and Las Vegas to be hot, we can't dismiss a more significant trend of all these heat records that have been broken with still 3 more weeks of summer ahead of us. Where I personally live, it's been a scorcher this week and records are continuing to be broken. It has not been enjoyable weather, to say the least. Hopefully summer will wind down soon. Now look, I know this can be a thorny subject for some in this community, but let's focus on the main issue here, the impact on food production. These abnormally high temperature events are gonna have long-range impact on our agriculture. Even if one place gets excessive rain, the opposite is gonna be true for many other places. Droughts are getting more severe and lasting longer in several places across the United States. And it's hard for some people to see the long-range impact of these records being shattered, even as they swelter through the heat waves. But it's essential to understand the impact this heat has on agricultural output. The USDA's net farm income forecast is expected to be revised downward yet again. I'll be honest with you, the heat as it relates to our food supply and infrastructure, it does keep me up at night, and I'm sure you as well. This summer and its extreme heat is going to pass eventually, but it should inform your preparedness for how you're going to move forward next summer. And you shouldn't ignore the fact that it will have lasting impacts on our food supply and infrastructure. I started building the grow shed, and I talked about this last year here on my channel on the side of my house, for this exact reason, to build a controlled grow environment where we could control the climate. I'm about 97% done, and I'll try to wrap up the last 3% as knowing how to control the variables is going to be important moving forward. And eventually, crops may fail as a result of these extreme conditions. So it's important to prepare like it could happen tomorrow instead of just waiting for it next year. Each record being broken should be a warning sign for you that it could impact you next. So what do you think? Are you feeling the heat of summer? Let us know how it's impacting you in the comments below. Finally, we can't ignore the recent news that broke out yesterday with more details today about how Russia is meddling in our government and media. A new federal indictment alleges that a media startup featuring figures like Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, and Lauren Southern secretly received funding from Russia. Now, maybe you've watched or follow one of these media influencers. If the allegations are proven to be true, if you do watch these channels, you've been directly fed Russian propaganda and Kremlin narratives. Now, the Department of Justice charged 2 Russia Today employees with violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act, or FARA, by orchestrating a $10 million scheme to influence U.S. audiences through hidden Russian messaging. Now, the indictment claims that Tenet Media's founders deceived the commentators about the funding channel through a Canadian shell company. Tim Pool and Benny Johnson stated that they were unaware of the scheme and considered themselves victims. And we have to remember that an indictment is merely an allegation. All defendants are presumed innocent until they're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. But still, There's enough evidence here to suggest that the Kremlin has been directly generating propaganda here in the United States. Let me just pause here for a moment. I've heard of Tim Pool, but I've not heard of the other people mentioned. In my YouTube account, I can log in and I can see, after someone watches my video, it shows me in the analytics the other 15 channels ranked from top to bottom that my viewers will go to and watch that content. It's really designed to help me understand what you want, so I can go over and look at the other channels and say, oh, okay, well, they're doing this, so maybe I'll give you more of that. It's just designed to help me improve the quality, basically. So I know some of you are going to watch, or you have been watching Tim Pool's video because he's in that top 15. So I know some of you probably viewed his content, and maybe some of you are upset that this is being brought up. I don't know, but the little that I know about his content, I've only watched it maybe a few minutes and it just was not my cup of tea. Based on what's happened here, it really follows a pattern that I've been discussing on my channel many times before. I talked about this a while back. One of the things that we will not touch on this channel is this whole notion of cultural wars and finding ways to get people riled up against their neighbor or anyone that doesn't believe like they do. And look, I simply refuse to do that on this channel, and it's just not how I was raised. Anytime someone says something that causes me to look at my own countrymen with disdain because of differences of ideology, that's just propaganda 101, and I refuse to engage and participate in it here on this channel. And I wouldn't do that to you. I believe it's deceptive and simply un-American. We're better than that. Federal officials have accused Russia of using unwitting right-wing American influencers in a covert propaganda campaign ahead of the 2024 US election. Now the charges, again, this is all allegations at this point. They allege that 2 RT employees secretly funneled $10 million to a Tennessee-based media company believed to be Tenet Media, which contracted with these aforementioned influencers. Now the influencers reportedly made videos aligned with Kremlin interests without knowing the funding's Russian origin. Now the Justice Department also announced actions against RT's top editor and seized several internet domains linked to Russia's influence efforts. Here's a fun video that you can watch after what we just covered.
They know it. But I don't know that it matters anymore. This is psychotic. Ukraine is the enemy of this country. Ukraine is our enemy.
So you see where I'm going with this? They've been paid by these Russian sources to speak critically of Ukraine. So again, this is what propaganda looks like. It is also revealed that this week that a Chinese state-linked influence known as Spamflage is impersonating U.S. voters and spreading divisive content ahead of the United States presidential election this fall, according to research by intelligence firm Graphica. Active since at least 2017, the campaign has used thousands of accounts across various platforms to push propaganda, denigrating both major U.S. political figures like Donald Trump and Joe Biden without favoring either side. Now, the operation aims to exploit societal divisions and undermine trust in American institutions. Recent activity has shown increase in sophistication and more success in engaging with U.S. audiences. So we steer clear of politics here on this channel because it doesn't help anyone with their preparedness, but we occasionally have to address it because of its potential to influence people and create social disorder. For every piece of misinformation, there exists a possibility that someone believes it, takes it to heart, and may act on it or react to it violently. And this goes far beyond who you plan to vote for this November. Now look, you can dismiss allegations as false if you'd like, but there's more and more information that's stacking up by the day that foreign interference and attempts to influence our elections are more of an obvious truth than a concocted myth of the deep state. So whatever you choose to believe, take 2 things from it. First, don't be duped. Don't accept anything as truth when first hearing or reading about it. As we head closer to the election, I would encourage you to increase your skepticism about the sources that you trust. You need to be skeptical of even me. I try to cite the sources in my videos, but if you find misinformation, let me know. I was about to say I wish I had $400,000 sponsors every month, but obviously not at that cost to spread misinformation. A separate opinion, also, you've got to learn to separate opinion from fact and always seek to corroborate information. You need to evaluate the source. And if they've lied to you in the past or what they said was proven not to be true and inaccurate, you need to consider finding alternate sources of information. Now, second, and I said this a moment ago, but it's worth repeating, remember that if your emotions are being appealed to and the source is simply riling you up, that's likely propaganda. It's either intentionally or unwittingly being brought to you courtesy of adversaries who would love to see a divided America. Now, second, you've got to prepare as if this will get far worse before it gets any better, and that someone somewhere may act upon this misinformation. You need to stay ahead of that by being cautious out there and making sure that you have a plan for civil unrest should it come to your community. And we don't know how potentially volatile this election cycle might be, but we do know that it isn't likely to go off without a hitch, and that any foreign misinformation campaign will increase the likelihood of things going south. You can take that however you like, but let it inform your preps and be safe out there. So what do you think? Is there a foreign campaign to influence our elections, sway our vote, or divide us? Do you know someone, or have you been influenced by this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. On a personal note, I closed escrow, as I've shared many times, and I did a video on recently on the new property. Gosh, it's about 6 weeks ago, and I've been over there pretty much working every day. The big thing I've been working on is security. It has two houses, the main house and then a barn. I call it the barn. It's a permitted house, but I've been working on the security. I've been, let's see, I installed a security system, been upgrading that. My father-in-law came over today. He is a welder, and we're gonna put bars on the inside of all the windows. So you can't see it from the street, but it's thin enough that we can put it on the inside and we can put curtains over it so it doesn't look like we're in a prison. So it's just, again, a lot of these solar generators I review, for example, they're all over there right now. And so there's a lot in there that could walk away very easily. So I just want to make sure I secure that location. I've been also getting ready for winter. We're, in our area, we tend to have a pretty wet rain season starting around November. There's a hill that needs to be terraced because it's causing a lot of rain to go to the main house, which unfortunately the previous owners didn't mitigate the issue and it caused a cracked foundation, which is why we got kind of a good deal in the house. But I want to get ahead of that and go ahead and have that terrace so we're not having any more water intrusion on the house. The barn also has what appears to be an out-of-date roof. I'm going to have some quotes given to me for that to possibly redo it because we're going to put solar on it anyway. Before you put solar on, you got to make sure the roof is going to last as long as the panels. So a lot's being done. Gosh, I feel like so many projects. I'm having to use a new project management system to keep track of everything because we have so many projects running at once. And to be honest, it feels a little overwhelming. Let me, as always, try to end with a word of encouragement. Again, I know this content that I did in this video, we kind of touched some things that may be sensitive to some people. Again, I know I'm going to get a lot of blowback in the comments. Hey, why did you point out that person or that? I like them, I think you're, biased against this political position. I have a pretty simple position, and whenever I see misinformation, disinformation, you name it, if somebody's trying to feed me BS, I don't like it. I don't care who it is, left, right, center. It doesn't matter. It's wrong. And so what I'm trying to do in my own personal life is continue to develop and focus on community. It's easy to be focused on what divides us versus what unites us. And it's not a message that I've really given a lot of time and attention to here on the channel in a while. It's one of the things that we try to continually promote is community. But I think in light of what we continue to learn, how should I put this? Heavy influences within the United States that continue to divide us because there's power in division. When you divide a people, it's easy to conquer, right? I mean, you can get people to do all kinds of things. And my encouragement to you as I've wrapped this video up is be careful. Anytime you find yourself, like I said a moment ago, being stirred up to anger, I'm really upset about this or this individual, you're probably being manipulated somehow. Think critically and think for yourself and be careful. Don't allow that hate to creep in. Hate is an ugly thing. And once it sets root, what it does, again, it's just not healthy. And look, I believe as a country, America's best days are ahead, but it's going to take a lot to get there. And as preppers, I expect the near future to be full of challenges. I just can't imagine anything changing in any profound way to improve my life. And I'm sure many of you feel the same. And that's why we do what we do. But don't lose hope. Continue to do what you do. And I'll continue to create content to hopefully help you. What I'll do at the end here is I'm going to link to a couple of videos on the side of the screen. One that explains how, if there's civil unrest in your neighborhood, how to prepare for that in your community. And the second one is how to build a 3-week food emergency supply. Now, I encourage you to check out both of those if you're not sure where to go next. As always, stay safe out there.